I uploaded a copy of the syllabus to D2L. It's under the content tab under syllabus. Two different copies, it's a PDF and a Word doc. Did that, I believe, on Saturday. And then I revised that a little bit, and I think I did that yesterday. As well as emailed a copy to all of you who are registered by then. So hopefully the one you have printed out is the one with the modified schedule of readings, because for some reason the bookstore did not get the first book I was going to start with in time. Or as of yesterday, they did not have it yet. It was still back ordered. My office is kind of catty-cornered to this door in the first office block over here, Peck Hall 352. It's in the back corner. Take a left, take a right, take a right. You've got my email address there, ted.sherman@mtsu.edu, with hours pretty much when I can be reached from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m., unless I'm in class, which I am Tuesdays and Thursdays from essentially 8 to 1. I don't provide a phone number because I don't answer my phone, even if I'm in my office, because vast majority of the calls are spam. Somebody's trying to sell me a retirement plan or one thing or another. So I just don't answer it. And if I get messages, I just delete them without listening to them. It's pretty much just there for show. But you can reach me usually via email. Okay? Office hours, and I don't think I got this on the one that, even the final version that I printed or sent to you, should be 5 to 6 p.m. Tuesday, not Monday. 5 to 6 p.m. Tuesday. And then 7:30 to 8, or just before class, on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And then from 12:45 to 1:45, also on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Okay? And by appointment. If none of those times work for you, email me and we will work out a time that will be beneficial either Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I can't really do any other time on Tuesday because I've got to get ready for my evening class Tuesday afternoons. Okay. Course is the fantastic tradition in literature. Hopefully that's something you're interested in, and more than just, oh, I've got to check off this Gen Ed course. If it's not, there's a lot of reading, and if you're not into reading much or quickly, you should probably take something else. There are other 2020 courses that are not nearly as reading intensive. I think there are some that are primarily viewing intensive, if that's more your proverbial cup of tea. The required texts, and I did not bring any of them with me today, are Lloyd Alexander's Chronicles of Prydain series. There are 5 in that. They should have ordered the box set, but I have no idea. The first one, the Book of 3, which is the one you need to have so you can start reading it for Thursday. The next one, Terror and Wanderer, the Black Cauldron. These are not in order, by the way. I just noticed. Black Cauldron, Castle of Lear, and the High King. Because Terror and Wanderer should be the second to the last one. Order should be Book of 3, Black Cauldron, Castle of Lear, Terror and Wanderer, and then the High King. I don't know how I got them in that order. The next one on the list are Charlie Fletcher's Stoneheart trilogy, Iron Hand, Silver Tongue, and Stoneheart. You will not be able to get those from the bookstore. Don't ask me why, but the bookstore has a policy where they cannot order books from Amazon. Which, to me, seems ridiculous because they would be able to get books for a hell of a lot cheaper if they ordered them from Amazon. You can order these books, and you have to order these books from Amazon, or you can go to Barnes & Noble if you want, or somewhere else. But some of these you can get for literally 99 cents plus shipping. Okay, but I would suggest doing it soon because I'm sure other people will also be ordering them. And then Neil Gaiman's Neverwhere, which the bookstore does have. If you don't get it from the bookstore, make sure you get the one that has the author's preferred text, because he's revised it and he's added and changed some things, which are pretty significant. I mean, I started rereading it a couple of weeks ago, and just from when I reread it earlier this summer, the one I read earlier this summer wasn't the author's preferred text, and there are some changes even in the beginning. Okay.
And that's for Stoneheart, right?
No, that's Neil Gaiman's Neverwhere. So I would suggest if you don't get it through the bookstore, at least order this ISBN number version. Okay, and then Madeleine which is what we were going to start the semester with, the Wrinkle in Time Quintet, 5 books, box set. We're only doing the first 3. Okay, but I wanted to order the box set because I have a feeling that if you get interested in the first 3, you'll want the last 2. So Wrinkle in Time, Wind in the Door, and Swiftly Tilting Planet are actually the 3 we're going to be using. If you don't buy the box set and just buy those 3, that's fine. Okay. Supplementary text, which I'm not requiring you to read, is an essay by Tolkien, J.R. Tolkien, titled On Fairy Stories. You've got a link to it on the syllabus where if you click the link, it'll take you to a PDF version. I'm going to, more than likely, I'll talk for just a few minutes today about that essay. We won't start talking about the Book of 3 at all today. Disclaimer. Syllabus is subject to revision. What that means is we may get behind. Okay? In which case, we'll just adjust readings downwards because it's not like it's going to affect a test or anything like that because I don't have any tests scheduled other than the exam. All right. There will be lots of quizzes, however. Okay. What else? The most important thing in that section is the comment to check your email or D2L daily before class. If I've got to cancel class for any reason, I'll send you an email or post it to D2L by about 7 o'clock, actually. Yeah, probably 7 o'clock because I'll have to do it for my other classes, which are earlier. So probably by 7 o'clock, give you plenty of lead time in case you've got a long drive to get here. Students with disabilities, you know who you are. You know what you need to do. Talk to whomever so they send me the email so I can verify that. Classroom decorum. Attendance is expected, but you'll notice when you read through the entire syllabus, I don't have any policy that says, I used to. I go back and forth every few semesters. I don't have a policy that says, if you miss 3 classes, your grade's going to drop by a letter grade. If you miss 4, you're going to fail. It's usually what I have. I don't have anything like that this semester. For the simple reason, we're going to have quizzes almost every day. You start missing a bunch of quizzes, your grade's going to tank anyways. So it's up to you. I do have to keep track of attendance like the first couple of weeks for federal bean counters, and then we have to let them know mid-semester for financial aid reasons and stupid stuff that has nothing to do with education. Anyways, see what else there. Arrive to class on time. Arriving after class has begun is rude, disrespectful, and disruptive. Will not be tolerated. I'll probably close the store after, 5 or 10 minutes after class begins, and it locks. So if you show up, 10 or 15 minutes late. I had one student repeatedly last spring, who would show up half hour, 45 minutes late. I'm just going to wave at you, or wave at you. Goodbye, go away. Don't bother me, in other words. Okay. What else? Course will be governed by common standards of decency and courtesy. We'll talk a little bit more about later. But these include time-honored notions that one should be quiet while another is speaking. One should be courteous to others. One should eat or chew gum quietly in class. That doesn't mean you have to eat or chew gum in class. But if you're going to, do it quietly. It's always somewhat disconcerting if I'm standing up here and, the class is somewhat packed and you're sitting right next to somebody and you open up a bag of crunchy Doritos or something and the person next to you, the veins start popping out on their neck and, I don't know if they're going to go all postal on you or what. So just don't do that. Okay. What else? One should not cheat. I know it goes without saying, but I have to say it. One should not cheat or plagiarize from another's work. One should pay attention to the instructor and to others. And kind of going back to the plagiarism, that you should personally complete the required assignments, rather than paying somebody else to do it for you. Failure to complete any assignment other than daily quizzes will result in failure for the course. Now, for this class, there's only 2 other assignments, the paper and the final exam. So if you don't do one of those, you fail, which, again, kind of goes without saying.
So there's only one paper?
Only one paper. Some of you might have heard things about this course from the past, and I'll explain why. I've made some radical changes this semester. I used to have what were essentially 3 papers. Final exam was one of them, and then term paper, and then another exam. And I decided to drop that for a variety of reasons, which I'll talk about. What else? If you don't abide by these standards, I'm going to ask you to leave. If you continually don't abide by them, if you get disruptive and start standing up and yelling or go all exorcist on me, I'll call the cops. They'll be positioned outside the next day of class, and they'll stop you from coming in. Cell phones, laptops, tablets, whatever else. I've actually got to put this in now because I'm a student last semester. The use of cell phones for calls, texting, yes, and selfies is strictly prohibited. I had a student last semester in classroom next door, 2 doors down, who sat right back in that corner, and the first 3 weeks of class, she just sat there the whole time, taking selfies. This angle, this angle, this angle, this angle. And I would say to her in class, Jordan, put it away. She'd put it away, get all, circumspect. Next morning, next day, she'd show up, do it again. Don't. If you're a first responder, you can have your phone out and on silent and let me know. Tell me that you are a first responder if you're an EMT or copper fireman or something. Similarly, if you have an ongoing family situation / emergency, or if one develops in the course of the semester, let me know immediately. Just send me an email. Dr. Sherman, my mother's got cancer. My father's in the hospital. My something. Don't tell me, my pet turtle died and I'm really crushed, so I can't make it to class for the next 2 weeks because I'm going to say, suck it up, Buttercup. But, because I've literally had almost every semester for about the last 10 years, someone whose parent has gotten cancer or been diagnosed with cancer, or somebody's had a heart attack, or somebody's been in a car accident. You let me know as soon as you know something's wrong. I will move heaven and earth to make sure that you can complete the course. That means, as I've done with a couple of students, if you can't physically be here, we'll work it out. So to where you can take the quizzes another way, where you can turn your paper in, take the exam. Every class is recorded and put on YouTube. So if you're not here, you can still get the material that was discussed that way. Okay? But let me know when it happens. Don't do, as I've also had happen almost every semester for the last probably 3 or 4 years, don't come up to me Thanksgiving week and say, Dr. Sherman, I'm really sorry that I've missed the last 6 weeks, but, because I'm going to say, I'm really sorry you've missed the last 6 weeks, but there's nothing I can do. You dug your grave, now lay in it, kind of a thing. Okay? I won't use that metaphor if, somebody died in your family. I'll come up with something else. I'm not that cold. Strongly discourage the use of laptops and tablets for note-taking. Why? Number of studies over the last 4 or 5 years, and if you're interested, I can email them to you, have shown that students who take notes via computer don't retain as much information as they do if they take notes by hand, okay? Or by laptop or by tablet. They don't retain as much as if they take notes by hand. And it's thought that one of the reasons for that is that, that what they're doing is they're merely transcribing. That is, whatever enters their ear, they're just typing away as fast as they can. So they're not really paying attention. But if you're taking notes by hand, your brain is filtering because your brain realizes, I can't get all of this now. And so it kind of filters out the unimportant stuff and only takes note of the important stuff. Okay? But if you're going to use a computer, your phone, a tablet for electronic texts, that's fine. I know a lot of students have started moving, because they're a little bit less expensive in some instances, have started moving to Kindle versions or PDF versions, illegal ones that you can download from the internet, which I think are available for almost all of these. By all means, you can do that. When I teach my Harry Potter course in London, I've moved entirely to electronic text just because I no longer like to lug about 10 pounds of books, because that takes up 1/5 of my luggage, weight at least, for 4 weeks. Okay, what else? If somebody tells me so-and-so is just, watching porn, I don't think I've had that happen yet, Facebook, searching the internet, posting or buying off Craigslist, advertising, date site visiting, etc., I'll ask you to stop. Okay? Grading. Why are you running so hot, computer? Grading. It's real easy. I add up all the points you earn, and I divide that by the total number of points possible. So your paper is going to be 100 points. Final exam will probably be 100 points. Quizzes will be, I don't know, somewhere between 100, let's say, and top 300 points. So quizzes could be significant. They could count a lot. They could count for possibly as much as half of your grade. Okay? So you don't want to screw up by not keeping current with the reading. If we have a quiz on Thursday, and we probably will, it'll probably be a dry run. It'll be a kind of a practice quiz to show you the kind of stuff I'm looking for, or the kind of stuff that you will be quizzed over. Okay? So, for example, for Thursday in the schedule, which next page, it's the book of 3. Okay? If we have a quiz on Thursday, it won't be over the entire book. It'll be over about the first half. So I would know the major kind of plot of the first half, the major characters, who is who, what are they doing, why are they doing it, when are they doing it, how are they doing it, what are they doing it with, whom are they doing it to, if they're doing it to anybody. Okay? I think that's pretty much clear there. You've got the grading scale, which is very simple. Expected reading quiz, as I say, almost every class period. So if I did that, there would be a total of about, 20, something like that. Probably won't be quite that many. Yes?
What genre is books under certain books in fantasy?
These books, they're all fantasy literature.
Okay.
Yep. So the reading schedule. The Alexander books, there are 5 in the series. So we've got essentially 10 days for those 5 books. Okay, 2 days for each 5. 2 days per book. They're not very thick. The first couple ones aren't very thick. I think the last one's probably the thickest. They're fairly easy to read. Fairly simple reading. They're usually marketed as young adult child's, though the content/ideas in them are not necessarily young adult children, though I guess they'd be good for young kids to read. They learn some good stuff. Madeleine L'Engle's books are similarly very easy to read. They're marketed towards young adults, okay, or adolescent literature, I guess, which is what Alexander's is also. Neil Gaiman's is decidedly not young adult. It's adult, but it's fantasy. It's set in lower London or London below. This is the tunnels and such below London, the underground, so to speak, and what is beneath the underground. And then the Fletcher books are also young adult and or adolescent. Okay? And we'll talk in a moment kind of why these books and the subject matter and such. You have on November 21st a deadline for your paper topic approval. That is, by that date, you need to either email me, talk to me before or after class or in office hours, or hand me a slip of paper that tells me what you want to write your paper about or what your paper will be about. It's not just, I'm going to write about A Wrinkle in Time, or I'm going to write about, well, it can't just be about A Wrinkle in Time. I'm going to write about the theme of heroism in fantasy literature, something like that. Okay, that's fine. You can't just say, I'm going to write about youth in literature. That's too broad. You need to narrow it down a little bit. Okay. And the reason I'm doing this is because I've gotten sick and tired of the night before papers being due, students emailing me for approval and saying, I would like to write about, because that verb tense is kind of scary when it's the night before the paper's due. I would like to write about means I haven't yet begun it. And if it's the night before the paper's due, I can almost guarantee you what kind of grade you're going to get if it's just being begun that night. Okay? I've got the final exam scheduled for the actual final exam scheduled time period, but it might end up being a take-home exam. It might be a short essay where I would give it out the last day of class, December 5th, and have it be due on the day that the final exam is normally scheduled. It would be fairly short, 2 to 3 pages probably, and somewhat narrow. It'd probably also be, something where you have to weave together an idea from all of the books or a majority of the books, that kind of thing. The problem with that is I'd have to come up with something that somebody hadn't already written their term paper about. Right? Or it'd make it really easy for one or two of you. You got some important dates there. Those are primarily, if you want to drop, what those drop deadlines are. I'm sure nobody will want to. Term paper, you've got 2,100 to 3,000 words. That's roughly 7 to 10 pages. Okay, so it's not very long. Okay, again, on a topic if you're choosing, but you have to get my approval. And you got some specific directions there. Okay, notice you must have direct quotations, not paraphrases or summaries, but direct quotations from at least 7 of the works on the syllabus. I don't care which 7, but at least 7 of them. You've got 5 Alexander books, 3 Madeline L'Engle books, 3 Charlie Fletcher books, and 1 Neil Gaiman book. So there's plenty to choose from. All right? And you must also include direct quotations from, should be a from in there, 5 separate scholarly secondary sources. Okay? Secondary sources. These are articles, book chapters, books written about your primary sources. Okay? That is, something written specifically about one of the 7 books you're quoting from, or more of those. They are not things like biographies. They are not encyclopedias, not even literary encyclopedias. Okay? They're specific articles or examinations about these specific works. Okay?
So, would say if there was a biography about one of the authors, and in that biography they discuss things that influence them to...
Only if, within that biography, there were a chapter that addressed, say for example, you're writing about Neil Neverwhere. Only if there was somewhere within that biography, like a chapter, that was specifically about the book Neverwhere. And about, say, autobiography in Neverwhere. That Neil Gaiman is actually writing about himself, in some weird, twisted way. Because he definitely isn't. It's only in that sense that that would be considered a secondary source. Biographies, encyclopedias and such normally would be considered what's called a tertiary source. In other words, it's kind of 3 levels removed. Primary source is the main thing you're writing about. Let's say you're writing about the hero's, Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey in Fantasy Literature. Okay? So you're writing about that. Your primary sources are going to be those novels here, okay, that you're discussing the hero's journey. Now, if you were to read Joseph Campbell's book, The Hero's Journey, that would also be a primary source because you're applying that idea to these other novels, all right? So a secondary source would then be what somebody else has written about the hero's journey in the Chronicles of Prejudice, or the hero's journey to the underworld in Neverwhere, okay? Something like that. If you have any questions, or if you ever have any doubts, or you're not sure, ask me, and I'll tell you whether or not something is a secondary source, okay? So notice your paper will have a minimum of 12 entries on the works cited page, right? Because you're going to have 7 primary sources, the stories you're writing about, okay, and 5 secondary sources. All right. Go to the end of the next paragraph, and this is why all that's important. I tell you, failure to include a title for your paper, failure to turn your paper on time, failure to follow these directions will result in an F, okay? Here's what I mean. When I get your term papers, I'll stack them all up, I'll alphabetize them by your last names, and here's my process for grading. I check to see that you have a title. If you don't, I give you one, I set it aside. The one I give you is F. I don't read it. I just set it aside. Why? You haven't followed directions. 95% of success in life is follow directions. It's really simple, you know, kindergarten stuff. Follow directions. Okay? So, that's the first thing I do. Assuming everybody makes that cut, usually, almost everyone does. It's like every semester there's one student who says, I don't believe him. I don't think he'll really do that. I do. I then still have a pretty big stack of papers. I've got 4 classes this semester. 3 of them are 2020s, so about 80 students. So it's a lot of papers. So I get those. Next thing I do is I turn to the works cited page. For this class, because this is different than the other 2, this class, there should be 12 different works on that page. If there are 11, I write F and set it aside. I don't even read it. Why? You didn't follow directions. You start to get the recurring theme here. If you're too stupid to follow directions, you shouldn't be at a university. I don't mean to offend, well, actually, if you're too stupid to follow directions, you shouldn't be in college. You should be somewhere else, okay? I don't know where, but somewhere else. Once I've done that, assuming everybody's followed those directions, I then go through and I count the quotations and make sure there are the required number. Assuming you pass that, then I actually read it. Okay, and you'll know, whatever your grade is, whether it's an A or an F, you'll know why you received the grade you received. Nobody has, I don't believe, ever gotten a paper back from me without good and sufficient reasons for why they received the grade. Even if it's an A and I loved it, you know, I'll have good point, very good, excellent, written throughout. So it's not quite like I slit my wrists over it, but it's still, you know, it's got a lot of stuff on it. F's sometimes look like I, you know, just did this because it's just marked all over. I don't use red pen, however. I usually use blue or pencil or something because, you know, red can be triggering to too many people. So assuming you follow the basic directions, then your paper will get read and marked up and given back to you. It might be given back to you at the beginning of next semester, but it'll be given back to you, okay? And then I show you at the bottom of the syllabus essentially what your first page should look like. In other words, what you should have on the left-hand side, how your title should look, you know, The Good Life in Fantasy Literature, or if you want to say The Good Life in the Chronicles of Prejudice and the Wrinkle in Time Quintet, you could do that. Okay, any questions so far just about the syllabus? All right, everybody's clear.
One question about the books.
Mm-hmm.
So you said Neverwhere, you need to get the author's preferred text. Are there any other books with a special?
No. No, I would suggest getting the ones with the ISBN numbers I provided you with. For the simple reason, those are the ones I'm using. So the way I teach is I bring the book in, and I start talking about passages. And we just kind of go through. Sometimes it's page by page. Other times we'll skip a bunch. Okay? But if you use the ones I'm using, you'll be on the same page, literally, as I'm on. If you use a different one, you might be sitting there scrambling, trying to find what is he talking about, or where is he? Okay? And I do strongly suggest, encourage, expect everybody to have a book with them. Okay? If you're just sitting there without anything in front of you, or with maybe a piece of paper, and you never write in it, that's not a real good indicator that you're paying either, one, any attention, or two, interested in learning anything. Okay? So I suggest you have a book and you be marking it up. If you're doing it electronically, taking notes of whatever form that are sufficient for you to learn the material. Okay, the topic of the course is the fantastic tradition in literature. It's really just fancy literature. Okay, I had to use big words like tradition in order to get it approved at committee level. And I used to, when I first started teaching this course in its second incarnation, I had a first incarnation back in the 90s, and then I had to repropose it, and it had to include a whole bunch of other stuff. It was kind of a historical overlook. So I began with the Old English poem Beowulf. And then we did Shakespeare's Midsummer Night's Dream. We did Charles Dickens's A Christmas Carol. One thing by George MacDonald from the late 19th century, and some early 20th century, and then on up to, I think the last thing was maybe one of the Stoneheart books. The problem with that is a lot of that stuff students really don't like, especially at the 2020 level. And I usually don't pretty much give a damn what students like or not. I mean, I teach what I like and what I think is significant. But it seemed to me it made more sense to do a series of books that kind of emphasized an idea, okay? And it's not just this idea of fantasy. The reason I included the Tolkien essay as a supplementary text, that is, you can read it or you can not read it. If you read it, it might help you understand some things a little bit more. It will definitely, if you're a Tolkien fan, it will definitely help you understand Tolkien better. It will be like glasses to the blind, okay, to understanding what Tolkien is doing. And I use the same thing when I do my Tolkien and Rowling course. But I do it because of some things Tolkien says in there, and this is an essay that he delivered in 1939, first published in 1945, about why what he calls fairy stories, but what he means by fairy stories is fantasy literature. Why it's important. Because I bet, for most of you, if you left here and you went and told somebody, told a friend, told a family member, especially if you told somebody older, in their 40s or 50s, yeah, I'm taking a course at MTSU and we're reading much fantasy literature. Okay? Or if you took my other course and said, yeah, I'm taking a course on Harry Potter. People would, one, roll their eyes, and two, say, what? You're getting college credit for Harry Potter? Isn't that, kiddie lit? Isn't that just children's stuff? Okay. Tolkien kind of looked at that argument and presents an apology for it. An apology. Not, oh my God, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. But a defense, okay, for fairy tales. And in his essay, he essentially says why fairy tales aren't needed by children. Okay. Take a stab in the dark. Why do you think he might say fairy stories aren't needed by children?
Because children, they have such wild imaginations all the time, and adults, they've grown up, they realize what reality is, so their imaginations are lacking. Yeah. And so the fairy tales or fantasies to help their imaginations keep on growing.
Children already have imaginary friends, right? A lot of them do. But if you talk to an adult, 25, 30, 40 years old, and they talk about their imaginary friends, you probably, one, take a step back and start to, wonder about this person's sanity. So Tolkien says children already have this gift, this ability, this characteristic. Okay? So he says adults, however, don't. We need what fairy tales provide. And he argues that fairy tales provide for us 4 things. Fantasy, recovery, escape, and consolation. Okay? And in a moment, I'm going to kind of use some of this to springboard into a rant about what we're doing here, not only here in this classroom, but here at the university, and what every university should be doing, but which far too many universities are afraid to do. Okay? So fantasy, what does he mean? Okay, he means fairy tales, but what does he really mean? Things that aren't real. Right? Things that don't really exist. And we see fantasies like that in literature, in written form. We see them in films, right? I mean, the mind-blowing experience in spring of 1977 when the first Star Wars came out was to not just see the words scroll down the screen or up the screen off into infinity, but to have those in and then to have that Star Destroyer come up over the top. And especially if you saw it on what was essentially an IMAX theater in 1977. It was just, you didn't have to be on acid or anything to have your mind blown. But if you were, that would, send you off into wherever, okay? But to have that experience, why? That had never been seen before. Yeah, Stanley Kubrick did 2001: A Space Odyssey. And all the ships, all the space vehicles in 2001 were brand spanking new, perfectly clean. When that Star Destroyer comes over you, it's got blast marks on it. It's dingy, even though space you wouldn't think of being as dingy. But it looks dirty, like it's been around the block a few times. Okay? Tolkien says that's arresting strangeness. How does he begin The Hobbit? Anybody know?
Yeah, the unexpected party.
In a hole in the ground there lived a hobbit. A what? A what? He began that story one day grading entrance exams to Oxford. He's sitting in his study over his garage. Wind's blowing through the window. Student's blue book in front of him. He finishes the exam. He turns the page. There's a blank page. And with his pencil, he just writes. I've held this in my hands. In a hole in the ground, there lived a hobbit. He had no idea what a hobbit was. This idea just popped into his mind. He put it down. He picked up the next exam. But the idea nagged him, so he started to create a story which he then began telling to his children. Then he started sharing the written form of it with a group of literary colleagues that he met regularly for beer and cigars, or beer and pipes. Okay? That becomes published as The Hobbit. We'll talk about how maybe in a moment. But then he's asked to write this essay on fairy stories a few years later. And he writes it, and he comes up with this because he says, children don't have need of these. Children don't need fantasy. if they're living a proper life as a child, they already have fantasy in their lives. Okay? So fantasy, as I said, arresting strangeness. The imaging forth of things that are unreal in this world. Give me an example of a fantastic creature.
Dragon.
Dragon. That's what almost everybody says first thing.
Unicorn.
Unicorn. Okay? And almost everybody says, one, I really wish dragons were real. Two, I wish unicorns were real. Tolkien says that. He says, as a child, I really desired for dragons to be real. I didn't want it in my backyard, but I wanted a world in which dragons were real. Just think about it. How amazing would it be if somebody digging around in the hills of Wales and they discover what appears to be a dragon skeleton? A dinosaur with wings, not a pterosaur, okay, but an actual dragon. Or better yet, what was that movie with Matthew McConaughey and...
Rain of Fire?
Yeah. Rain of Fire. Set in London, they're digging for the tube and stuff, and oops, dig a little bit too deep, and they awaken the dragons. Okay? Dragons would be cool, right? Living dinosaurs today. Not Jurassic Park, but dinosaurs, totally cool. Okay? But they're not. We don't see them. Name something that is unreal that you wish was real that you could really see.
Magic.
Okay? That's kind of a broad thing, though. I mean, like a thing. Why is it extraterrestrial films are always, seemingly, blockbusters?
Because everybody wants to know if aliens exist or not.
People want to know, are they real? Some people want to see them. I used to really want to see an alien or a UFO. I read, all about Project Blue Book when I was in high school and stuff. Read the file, the whole 9 yards. Wanted to see them. Growing up in California, we don't have tornadoes in California. Got earthquakes, wildfires. Earthquakes don't bother me. Always wanted to see a tornado. And then I was in two in Murfreesboro. I don't care if I went another 50 years and never saw a tornado again. Okay? So that's all part of fantasy. Recovery. What's he mean by recovery? Tolkien says it's regaining of a clear view. Seeing as we were meant to see. Okay, now, obviously that means something. He's saying adults don't see as we're meant to see. Or adults don't see clearly. Like, we all have these on, but they're dirty and smudged. Well, what don't we see clearly? Do I not see clearly that there's a bunch of people in front of me? No, I see that very clearly. He talks about the drab triteness of familiarity. And he talks about that in the context of seeing things and people as distinct from ourselves. I see each of you as distinct from me. It's not like we're physically connected in some way. And yet, what about the people you see every day in and day out, for years of your lives? My wife and I have been married for over 32 years. I've seen her literally almost every day in those 32 years, except for times when I'm teaching in London or I've been at a conference or something like that. But out of those 32 years, I've probably not seen her maybe a total of 9 months out of those 32 years. The drab triteness of familiarity, Tolkien is suggesting that especially with our familiars, those that we love, our families, hopefully, that you see regularly, you tend to do what with them?
Just become like an automaton.
Okay.
Just go through the motions. Get bored by them.
Get bored, take them for granted. In other words, I've seen you today, yesterday, the day before. I saw you all last week. I saw you the week before that. You become almost ordinary. And he's saying what recovery does is it makes the ordinary extraordinary. It enables us to see what? If you're in love, if you've been married for a while, it enables you to see the person you love or the person you're married to like the first time you saw that person. When you go, wow. Rather than the ball and chain. I'm not wearing my wedding ring because my finger is swollen. Rather than, oh yeah. Okay. Now that could be, that kind of loved one. It could be a child. It could be a friend. Because what do people often suffer from when a loved one suddenly dies? Okay. Regret. Why? I didn't tell them. I didn't say, I love you. What's even worse? You dirty rotten! And then they get hit by a car. And your very last words were words of anger or hatred, etc. Okay? So, recovery means all that. But what else does it mean? It means looking out through something like, talk about needing recovery. It means looking at the whole world, not just the people that are around us, but looking at everything with renewed eyes, with, like a child, renewed wonder. Find a child, kidnap a kid, and go, walk somewhere with a 5-year-old. And that 5-year-old in a 100-yard walk is going to find crap on the ground that they're, maybe not literal, but maybe literal, that they're going to pick up and say, wow, look at this, isn't it cool? And you're thinking, it's a bottle cap, put it down. You don't know where that's been. It's a X, Y, or Z. But to that kid, no, it's something special. Why? Because they're not seeing it the same way you're seeing it. Similarly, trees. That's why Tolkien has tree beard. Okay, in The Lord of the Rings. Tolkien loved trees. If there was one thing that was non-human and living that he wished could speak, it was trees. How many of you have pets? I mean real pets, not like a fish. That's not a real pet. A dog or cat. Okay? How many of you wish you could talk to your dog or cat and have them talk back? Now, some dogs you'd say, shut up. Cats would probably, dish you in one way or another. But some animals, yeah. Okay? And Tolkien's like, that's kind of seeing the glory in things. Okay? Escape. If there's one thing humans could escape from, what would that be?
Reality.
Okay, what do you mean by reality?
Just their day-to-day work.
Okay? Be more specific. If
luxury.
there's one thing that you didn't have to face, what would it be? Death. We have entire industries built around escaping death. Not literally. Well, some are literally. Cryogenics. I'm going to freeze my body so when they figure out a way to bring me back and... Really? Do you think Walt Disney really wants his body reanimated now? When everybody he knew is dead? I mean, the name Voldemort in the Harry Potter novels means fly from death. Why? Because he's afraid to die. What is the entire series about?
Death.
Harry learning how to die well. Everybody has to die. But you can approach death one of two ways. You can approach it like Dylan Thomas's narrator in Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Or you can accept it. It doesn't mean you're resigned to it. But it means you can go facing death nobly, like Harry does in the Harry Potter novels, if you're familiar with the seventh novel. Okay? So Tolkien says, this kind of literature gives us things to escape from. What other kinds of things would you like to escape from? School, I've heard. What else? Other than reality. Give me specifics within reality. What about reality do you not like? People? Wow. There's an episode of Lost in Space back in the 60s where the character Will Robinson, Billy Mummy, who is, 8, 9 years old, in one of the episodes, he's like, I just wish everybody would leave me alone. And he wakes up, I think it is the next morning, and everybody's gone. He's totally by himself. He's like, Dad, Dr. Smith, robot. Everybody's gone. I didn't mean it. I don't want to be totally by myself. And they come back, okay? Hunger, poverty, hatred, racism, prejudice,
Greed.
Louder,
Greed.
grief,
No, greed.
greed. Tolkien even says, because he hated them, the internal combustion engine. He hated automobiles. He didn't really care much for trains either. They were a little bit better, but he didn't really like them. He saw them as moving people into slavery because they enabled people to go farther distances to work. And Tolkien equated that with slavery, where people become enslaved to their work. Okay? He's pretty forward-thinking when you think about it. So he says, these tales offer us these kinds of escape. I mentioned the character Treebeard. It's people talking with other. What is one of the reasons? You could get all psychological if you want. What is one of the reasons for the desire for aliens?
Because it's another sentient being you can talk to that's not a human.
To put that in shorter terms, it means we're not alone. It means we're not alone. Now, I don't care what your religious beliefs are. I mean just humanity. Because right now, as far as we know, what? This is it. We're it, folks. Out of the entire universe, from what we know, we are it. Yeah, we found all kinds of other planets out there. We haven't found anything that indicates there's any kind of life. Even if it's an amoeba. Nothing. Okay? So, to find out there are aliens means we can talk to somebody else. We're not all alone in the universe. Which is another way of phrasing, is there a God? Are we just merely the products of chance and time? And a couple of chemicals splashing against each other 14 billion years ago, etc. Okay? And then the last thing, consolation. Tolkien says fairy stories offer their readers consolation. He calls it, in fact, the highest end of fairy tales is the happy ending. He does not mean the Disney-fied ending. He hated Disney. Just absolutely was disgusted with what Disney did with classic fairy tales. Snow White, Cinderella, etc. Okay? Why? Because how do all the fairy tales end in Disney?
Happily ever after.
And they all lived happily ever after. Read Grimm's versions, the Grimm's brothers' version of, I don't know, Cinderella. Read what the sisters and other women do to their feet to try to get them to fit the glass slipper. They cut toes off, they cut parts of their heels off to get them to fit, and they just won't fit. Okay? Read what happens to, the little old lady in Hansel and Gretel. She does get cooked in the oven. Okay? Those stories aren't all, and they all lived happily ever after. Why? Because those stories are meant to teach lessons to children. What are some of the lessons they teach? Don't be greedy, possibly. What are some others? Don't be selfish. There are such things as monsters in the world. Yeah, they might not all take the form of Grendel from Beowulf. They might take the form of, oh, I don't know, Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer, you know, your friendly neighborhood cannibal. Okay. They might take the form of monsters like in the Marvel movies, which are really just people. They might take the form of Hitlers and Pol Pots and Stalins, and depending on your politics, as I've had some students say, you know, Bushes and Clintons and Obamas and Reagans. I had one student, my first year teaching here, write a paper, and he mentioned the triumvirate of Lenin, Stalin, and Lincoln.
Abraham Lincoln?
Yeah. This is an old boy from Virginia. You know, he didn't like it when I went on about the KKK. In fact, he ended up dropping the class. But yeah, Lincoln, Stalin, and Lenin. That was a kind of eye-opening experience. So this consolation, so what does he mean by it? He coins a term. It's called the eucatastrophe. Because everybody in here is familiar with the word catastrophe, right? What's a catastrophe?
Horrible disaster.
Horrible disaster. What's happening in Houston right now? Just before class, I was on the Drudge Report, and I read the updated rain totals. 49 inches already. And they're still expecting a couple days rain in some parts. They're now forecasting over 5 feet of rain, 60 inches of rain in some of these places. Okay, I'm like 5'10", so just the rain they had as of yesterday morning, just to give you an idea of how much water this is, would cover all of the lower 48 United States in 3 pennies depth of water. The entire lower 48. Stack 3 pennies and that much water has fallen just on Houston. Put it in a block 2 miles square, it'd be 4 miles deep, I think it is. That's a lot of water, okay? That's a catastrophe, right? No, it's not. A catastrophe, literally, is just a sudden change of events, a sudden turn. So, the woman in Connecticut the other day, who won the Powerball lottery, $729 million. I think she'll walk away with something like 300 something. Yeah, damn government. But still, $300 million. That's a catastrophe for her, right? She didn't have that 300 plus million the day before. That is a sudden change. How many people in this room? Let's just whittle it down a little bit and say, you woke up tomorrow and you had 1/300th of that, $1 million. How would that change your day? Yeah, the look on your faces. Would you be here tomorrow or the next day? I don't know that I would, folks. If I played the lottery and I won 50 million, 500 million, whatever, you might get the department chair coming in the following day and saying, this class has been canceled. I hate to tell you this. I probably would, live out the semester, but then, sayonara, life's too short. It's a catastrophe, a sudden change. We tend to think of it as bad things happening, as just a catastrophe. Those are discatastrophes. The hurricane, tornadoes, fires, gunshots, etc. Okay? So Tolkien said, well, I need to come up with another word. The eucatastrophe. You is in the beginning of the word eulogy, euphemism. Somebody dies, we don't say, oh yeah, Ted Dare died. We say he fell asleep, he passed away. He's reposing in the Lord. He kicked the bucket. Why? It sounds nicer. I could say, you're an idiot, stupid. You failed this test. So I could say, oh, you didn't do so well. A little bit bit nicer, right? Okay. So a eucatastrophe is a beautiful catastrophe, winning the lottery. But in fairy tale tradition, the beautiful catastrophe is the sudden, what Tolkien calls the sudden turn, the sudden change of events, that when it happens, it makes you catch your breath. You go, where is one in Star Wars? Pick any of the films. Well, don't pick the three
Prequels.
bastards, yeah.
We'll find out that Darth Vader's with father.
Okay? Is that a eucatastrophe or is that a discatastrophe?
This.
And for Luke, that's a, what? Look at that's like finding out Satan's your dad, you know.
Or when Darth Vader throws Emperor Palpatine.
That is a catastrophe, a eucatastrophe. Do you ever expect Darth Vader to turn? No. By the way, what does his name mean?
Oh, Dark Father.
What does Darth mean? It's not pronounced correctly. In English pronunciation, it's dearth, lack. If you have a dearth of wealth, it means you're poor. If you have a dearth of water, it means you're thirsty. If you have a dearth of food, it means you're hungry. Lack father. Okay? So when Darth Vader picks up the Emperor and throws him down, that's a eucatastrophe. Where is it in The Lord of the Rings? Precious, precious, precious. It's when Gollum falls into the fire after having bit the ring off Frodo's finger.
Or when Rohan comes to Gondor's Age.
Or when Rohan comes to Gondor's Age. Or when Gandalf is standing there at the gates of Minas Tirith and the captain of the Nine is getting ready to whoop ass on him. And what happens? We hear the cock crow. Because what happened at exactly that moment? That's when Gondor comes. Or that's when Rohan comes. It's when Eowyn reveals herself. No mortal man am I. Got you, you patriarchal. Okay. Harry Potter? Is it when Harry goes, die in hell, Voldemort, burn, Does he ever say that?
No.
Does Harry have a final great climactic battle with Voldemort in the books? No. What does it all come down to?
Yes.
Avada Kedavra, oh yeah, the hell with you, Expelliarmus. That's it. Without the hell with you. Because what does Harry offer him before that? If your only experience of Harry Potter is the films, then you've probably completely misinterpreted what the books are about. Because the films, the first part of the 7th film and the last part of the 8th film, leave out something at the beginning of book 7 and the end of book 7. They leave out Dudley's redemption, and they leave out Voldemort's chance for redemption. When Harry says, I've seen the real you. Try for some remorse. Be a man. And he's like, I can't believe you're actually saying that. And he offers it to him twice. What does Harry mean when he does that? He's saying, I know how you can make yourself whole again. How you can repair your damaged soul. That's redemption. There is no other way of looking at that. And it's not in the film. Instead, Harry has this great big battle, and he kills Voldemort, essentially. Completely opposite. That's the eucatastrophe in the novels. Okay? It's not that Voldemort dies. It's Harry offering redemption. It's Snape's story being revealed. Okay? So we're going to see a lot of these things in these novels. Now, kind of briefly, what does all this, though, have to do with real life? Because you'll hear students say, you'll read about students at other college campuses say, why do I have to read this? It's not relevant. It's not about me. How would you respond? How would you respond? Because I'm going to tell you how I'd respond. First of all, I'd want to go up and smack them, but I can't do that. So?
They gotta find a bigger meaning.
Okay. Is life really about you?
No.
What do you mean, no? Your life? Why isn't it about you?
Because it's also everybody else's life.
See, one of the things you're going to see from each of these novels, and as far as I know, only one of these authors is quote-unquote religious. Madeleine L'Engle was a Christian. Neil Gaiman, I don't know if he's atheist. I don't know if he's just, I don't really care. I don't have time for that. Charlie Fletcher, I don't know. And Lloyd Alexander says that Christianity informs his works, but he doesn't say that he is a Christian. And yet, every one of these books talks about this idea or shows this practice of humility. Now, I don't mean humility, oh, I'm the worst person in the world. I'm so horrible. That's not humility. That's nonsense. Humility is putting somebody else's needs above your own. Humility is what you see going on in Houston today, where you see people helping others, sometimes against their own self-interest. Humility is what you saw when you saw, what was it? Something like 270 firefighters on 9/11 run to the towers rather than away. Or the police going to the towers. How's that humility? Well, that's their job. They're paid to do that. Yeah. Talk to cops. And some cops will say, I'm paid to do certain things. I'm not paid to run up to a building that I know is going to collapse. Or firefighters. What are they doing? Your life is what?
Over there.
More important than mine. Okay? You're going to see, to some extent, in each of these, characters doing that. So, relevance. What might the authors be suggesting? Maybe if we just kind of turn our gaze outward a little bit, rather than only looking at ourselves. My previous class, it's European Lit to 1400. We're reading a bunch of proverbial phrase, dead white males. Every last one of them. Dead, white, and male. Yep, all of them. And people across the country have said, why do we have to read that stuff? English majors at Yale petitioned the department chair to change the requirements so that they didn't have to read a course in major English poets. Okay, they're English majors. And they were saying, I don't have to read a course in major English poetry because they're all written by dead white males. Chaucer, Shakespeare, Spencer, Milton, Donne, Wordsworth, Coleridge, Blake. Okay? And the chair goes, oh, that's fine. We'll change it. In other words, catered entirely to what they wanted because they want the curriculum to be about them. The only problem is, and I don't mean to, I do, I want couch terms. They don't know enough. They don't know what they don't know. They don't know what they need to know. So reading those authors, reading these authors, allows you to do what? Reading any author allows you to do what? That you may not have an opportunity otherwise to do. Shakespeare, for example. My son's in a production of, my youngest son is in a production of Shakespeare in the Park up in Nashville, Centennial Park. I'm going to give you extra credit possibilities by going to a couple of the plays. The woman playing Cleopatra in Antony and Cleopatra, who's fantastic, just superb actress, is a redhead. And some writer for WPLN, National Public Radio, wrote an article not talking about the quality of the production at all. They wrote entirely about How in the world is a red-headed white woman playing Cleopatra? I mean, Cleopatra's Egyptian. Well, actually, Cleopatra was Greco-Macedonian, first of all. Probably more Greek than she was Egyptian, but that's beside the point. And the whole gist of the article is, really, in a city the size of Nashville, you couldn't find a woman of color to play this part? And the artistic director wrote back and said, nobody auditioned. We picked the best person who auditioned. Well, then you should have sent out a specific casting call. What's the problem with that kind of thinking? How many of you know anything about Shakespeare's plays during his own day? Who played all the roles of women?
Men.
Men and boys. Okay. Who played Othello, the Moor, African?
A white man.
A white man. Okay. If you take that kind of argument to its logical conclusion, I was talking with the guy who plays Anthony. He wouldn't be able to play Anthony. He's a white guy. Well, Anthony was a white guy too. But Patrick's Irish. Anthony would have been what? Italian. Hello.
That broke bad news.
So you could only get Italians to play Italians? You could only get Greeks to play Greek. I mean, if you take that argument to its logical conclusion, you can only get people from that particular demographic to play that. What does that do with the very quality of what is happening in your mind when you go to a play? What are you doing when you go to a play? Or you go to a film? First of all, are those characters real?
Suspension of disbelief.
It's not suspension of disbelief. Tolkien says it's the creation of literary belief. In other words, when the girl who plays Cleopatra, Carrie Brewer, when she comes out as Cleopatra, does she portray Cleopatra in such a way that you don't see this actress, but you see instead Cleopatra? Okay. When you watch any film, the Harry Potter films, which I absolutely detest, but do you only see Daniel Radcliffe? Or do you come to see Harry Potter? Do you only see Emma Watson? Or do you come to see Hermione Granger? Okay. Do you only see, I don't care who it is, X, Y, or Z. Do you only see Denzel Washington, or do you come to see whoever the character he is portraying? If the actor is a good actor, you come to see the character, whoever that character is. Can you have an all-black Antony and Cleopatra? Yes, you can. Can you have an all-male Antony and Cleopatra? Yes, you can. Can you have an all-female Antony and Cleopatra? Yes, you can. It only works, however, what?
If the actor's good.
Yeah, if the cast is good. And if the directing's good, you know, that kind of, if it's a film, the cinematography, you know, all that other kind of stuff. If it's got all kinds of problems with it, then you're going to go, man, this is crazy, and you're going to get up and leave, which Tolkien talks about in this essay. Okay? So what's my point? My point is, in everything that we're doing in here, okay, you've got to enter into the work as it is written. You've got to enter into Shakespeare's play kind of as it's written. If you don't like it, Ray Bradbury talked about this in Fahrenheit 451, or a little work he wrote that he penned into Fahrenheit 451 in the 1990s. If you don't like what an author has written, don't change it. For example, the new edition in the last year or two, or it might be forthcoming, of Huckleberry Finn is being published. Have any of you read Huck Finn? Who's the famous character who has the word that cannot be used in society anywhere today? Nigger Jim. And the editors have removed the word nigger. Why? Well, it's offensive to some people. Okay. So you take it out of there. What about the character of Nigger Jim. I mean, it doesn't change his character at all. It's just you taking off part of his name. He is still the same character. So do you remove the character? Do you completely change the book? People did that in the 18th century with some of Shakespeare's plays. They didn't like that the tragedies were tragedies, so they made them comedies. King Lear. King Lear and Cordelia don't die. They live happily ever after. Okay, but then that's not the same book. So Ray Bradbury, in this coda that he wrote to Fahrenheit 451, said, if you don't like the book I've written, don't change it. Write the book you want to write. Okay? So what's he mean? There are many different ways to burn a book. You can do it literally by burning the book, which we've seen in our own lifetimes. You can do it by editing a book, by changing a book. He was talking about it in the publication of Fahrenheit 451. People had removed dams and hells, editors. And he's like, damn it, I put those dams and hells in there for a reason. This is a book against censorship that editors are then censoring. Okay?
Was the irony lost on them?
Entirely. Well, the same kind of irony you see lost on people around college campuses today. Because a college, a university, well, it used to be the one place all ideas can be discussed. All ideas. In other words, it wasn't a safe space. It wasn't a safe space. You should be challenged. You should be offended. You should, at times, walk out uncomfortable. It's not safe space in the sense that you should be free from physical harm. Yes, college, every place should be that. Unfortunately, it's not reality, right? Okay. But it's the one place where all ideas ought to be able to be discussed. And good ideas would then do what?
You write it down and keep it.
Okay, that
They'd flourish.
they would flourish. They would defeat bad ideas. So rather than say, oh, we can't discuss this, it's a bad idea. What happens in your own life? Especially when you're, younger teenager. And somebody tells you, you can't go see that movie. What do you want to do?
See that?
Okay. So, you can't hear that idea because it might offend somebody. That is, none of you can hear that idea because she's offended by it. That's what it means when, parents call the school, I don't want anybody reading Harry Potter because it's satanic. Therefore, because I think it's got this, they can't read it. Okay? This is the one place all ideas should be. I'm complete absolutist when it comes to free speech. I mean all ideas. Racist ideas of whatever branch of racism. It doesn't matter to me the color. Arabs supremacy, Mexican supremacy, black supremacy, white supremacy, smorgasbord, rainbow supremacy. Doesn't matter. Let them all have their spot in the sun. Because what happens?
Good ideas take over.
In a true marketplace of ideas, the best ideas win out. How? Through reason. Does it mean the white supremacist is going to go, well, golly gee, I've just been mistaken all my life? No, because their ideas probably aren't held rationally. They're probably prejudiced, which is not a rational held belief. It's got to take a little bit more to knock that out. Okay? But it doesn't mean you're a white supremacist. We're going to lock you up. We're going to ban you from campus. We're going to send you off to re-education camps. That's Stalin-esque, Mao-esque. I see you come in here and wear a Che shirt. It's Che-esque, Che Guevara. Okay? One of the great mass murderers of the 20th century. So the ideas we're going to see discussed in some of these books are going to challenge you. And some of the ideas we will talk about in class in relation to them are going to challenge you. They are going to upset you. I will challenge and upset you. I won't microaggress. I'll be in your face with the aggressions. Okay?
So macro.
Yeah, there'll be macroaggressions. Yep. All right. First Alexander book for Thursday. First half of it. And I should have, if you're interested,